The Hero Xtreme 200R is a commuter bike from Hero which tries to achieve a balance between power, comfort and looks. The pricing is already spot on, with this bike being offered at similar price levels of some 150cc motorcycles in India. Fit and finish along with paint quality and switches are really good, and LED headlamps and tail lamps along with their new remarkable console with gear position indicator, 2 trip meters with average speed, eco mode and even Bluetooth connectivity lend this bike a premium feel. The 199.6cc engine is producing 18.1 horsepower at 17.1 Newton meters of torque. The engine is still a carburetor, and I would have preferred an optional FI variant. Brakes are 276mm single disc up front with ABS, and rear is a 220mm disc without ABS. 37mm standard telescopic suspensions up front and a 7-step adjustable rear monoshock do a very good job in handling bad roads. On seat height, it's a very low 795mm with a lot of room for both the rider and pillion, and the 149 kgs of curb weight is easy to manage even for shorter riders. Hero puts in a large fuel tank of 12.5 liters, and I think most people will appreciate that. But enough with the specs, it was time to collect the motorcycle from High Tech Hero Kolkata. They have lent us this bike, so you can contact them for any test drives or bookings. And let's head back to the review.
So starting up for the first time on the Hero Xtreme 200R. So this is the faired version, and there's a naked version as well. The sitting position is right where I wanted. It's not superbly aggressive. At the same time, it's not 100% upright. There's like a 15-degree lean forward. They're using standard handlebars on this, not the raised clip-on like Pulsars, and honestly it doesn't really matter because it feels the same way, and it gives the bike a really comfortable riding position. Also, I must say that the throttle lag which I was feeling on the other bike, the 200T, is not there on this bike. This is more instantaneous. So even though it's making the same amount of power on paper, this bike actually feels better to ride. And the bike does have an eco mode, you know, that's a rare feature on motorcycles. But imagine having the power when you need it, and when you don't want it, you put it to eco mode. I think it will be doing the same mileage as a 150cc motorcycle. So it looks really big. I mean, bike has road presence. It's available in several color schemes. This is kind of like a brown, metallic brown, and then there's the red one which looks absolutely stunning. I've seen there's a lot of interest on this bike on social media. People have been asking me to cover it because you guys know that I will give the honest opinion. That's Ride with Rahul is all about, unbiased reviews. Throttling up and down, it feels really good. Got a very linear power delivery, and if you guys can hear that exhaust note, this sounds pretty good for a single cylinder motor. And I mean, all the naked bikes that we ride around are single cylinders, so the sound is nice. Now the windshield, you know, there's a short amount of windshield out there. A lot of people do tell me that, you know, having a faired bike does help in the wind blast on the highway, but as you can see, that windshield is really short. So that's with all the bikes like Pulsar, RS200 and everything. So this is more like it can give you a bit of aerodynamic stability on highway rides, but for the rider wind protection you would need to add a taller double bubble screen, which unfortunately for these bikes is hard to get at an accessory. But you know, these aren't doing really high speeds, so it's not like you're gonna get a ton of wind blast. It's 4:30 a.m. in the morning, starting on the Hero Xtreme 200R. It's pretty early, so I can show you the wide beam that this motorcycle produces. The headlamp design, they've really hit the nail on the head. I've ridden it last night, so I'm very happy with the headlight performance. As you can see, it's a really wide beam, and of course if you switch it to the high beam, look at the buses over there. Very nice. Now initially I was under the impression that the motorcycle lacks a fast light switch, but that's not true. The high beam low beam switch here, if you just flick it, it can be used as a fast light. I use that a lot instead of horns. I really don't like blaring my horn unless absolutely necessary. Speaking of the horn, it is there and it's pretty loud. Now this bike is an absolute champion of bad roads, and the suspension up front is soft, and the suspension on the rear is a 7-step adjustable suspension, but right out of the factory it is set to a very soft and comfortable setting. So going over bad roads like, you know, broken patches or speed breakers, you hardly feel a thing. The motorcycle just absorbs the bumps up very nicely. So maybe the softer suspension is not advantageous in corner, but remember, you can set the rear to a harder setup. Even after so much development, we still do have these horribly made roads, and the motorcycle is just, you know, it's just gliding over it. That's my friend Sandeep. He'll be assisting me with the shoot. So the Xtreme 200R, there is a naked version that's called the S. I really like the sound. Hero has done a good job with it, and the throttle lag which I was feeling on the 200T is not present on this bike at all. In our riding condition, the horrible traffic, the bad roads and all of that, it takes a toll on the rider, specifically on the rider who's doing a lot of city riding every day, which we sport bike guys kind of are fortunate enough not to do every day. But this is the motorcycle for the everyday rider who's doing a lot of commute to work. Maybe he lives 30 kilometers away and has to ride 30 kilometers in the city every day. For him, the sporty, hard, stiff suspension may not be a blessing, it might be a curse. At least the mirrors would have been on the fairing instead of the handlebar, but Hero just kind of has created a standardized motorcycle. So they've given normal handlebars and not clip-ons, so there is enough space for the mirrors. And by the way, the mirrors are pretty wide, so I like that. They show a lot of view, and specifically they have spaced them out so much that there's no elbow viewing. Very functional mirrors. Let's talk a little bit about engine refinement. Now this is a single cylinder, and it does have slight amount of vibes as you'd expect from any other similar single cylinder motor. It's not like a super smooth engine, but you know, this is just a new bike, so after the first service mostly motorcycles improve. It's limited to having 5 gears, so whatever speed you are able to achieve is going to be on the 5th gear. I'm doing some braking test. Brake down from probably 120, 115 to 66. it's like half near abouts, and brakes are progressive. I really like the front brake on this one, and even the rear brake is giving a good amount of progressive support to add to it. We are kind of late, which is a good thing because I'll be rushing, and that's where you can test the potential of a motorcycle. So it's pretty early morning still. We're having some traffic conditions. I'm still gaining confidence, so went kind of wide on that corner. Now, one thing I'd like to tell you is the throttle response is very beginner friendly. It's instantaneous, but the throttle angle, see, I'm opening up the full throttle, how much big the angle is, so it's not those quick throttles. So for getting to full throttle, you really need to twist your wrist. Now that means the power, if you accidentally twist it a bit too much, will not be too much in your face, making it easy for beginner riders. But for a little bit more pro riders, they'll probably prefer a shorter quick throttle angle. Just pointing out how things are. Now the suspension, as I've said, it's really intuitive for bad road conditions, but while I'm pushing it in the corner, the bike does move around a fair bit, so you have to be like a little bit more careful with this bike. And obviously you can set the rear to a harder setup, and I believe this bike will handle a lot better. Than the front end feedback is there, but this bike is still running on 100 and 130. These are the tire sections, width of the tire sections, so they're kind of on the shorter side, or the thinner side, which is fine for the city. But if you go into the highways, I prefer having a little bit better or wider tires, as you know. But you can always upsize to 140 if the stock size is 130, so they probably want to give you more mileage because that's how the typical Indian consumer thinks. But I would definitely recommend you to upsize the tires if you're thinking of getting this bike. And so far I do like this bike, so I can give you a spoiler alert that I'd probably recommend it to a lot of people looking into the 150 160 cc category, because it's significantly more powerful than that and at the same price, so it's in your budget. Now the power figures, since we're talking about that, it's 18.1 horsepower or 18.4 metric horsepower, which is known as PS. The torque is 17 Newton meters, 17.1, and that's also coming in at around 6,500 RPM, which is better at a lower RPM. Now, playing around in the corners is a bike, you know, you have to carefully lead it in. That's what I'd say. But maintaining good speeds, we're doing 80-83 kilometers per hour within the city, which I think is more than sufficient. So, you know, for those guys who are really into lots of city riding, I do recommend this motorcycle. And overtaking, you do have to push your throttle, but if you are doing it, you shouldn't have much problems. Another thing is the weight, and the weight is close to the 150 kg mark, and that means it is overall a lighter motorcycle, and that actually affects in the power because you feel it's more powerful since it doesn't have to push so much curb weight. A 12.5 liters of fuel tank. That means for those who are actually looking to take this bike onto some touring, a lot of people think about like buying the Pulsar RS200 as a sport touring vehicle, and they do have a better or I'd say maybe lesser powered but a more economic option as a sport tourer. And you see it's a pretty small handlebar, I believe smaller than the 200T. Filtering is very easy. The front end is absolutely light. These bikes, you know, they're very effortless to ride, and as a beginner bike, a lot of people say that you want to start on a motorcycle, you're kind of like, you're apprehensive about the power, and this is a very beginner friendly motorcycle. The front end is light. It doesn't take that much, you know, effort to ride this bike. The power is good enough for a beginner to enjoy. At the same time, it's not overwhelming, so that's always a good thing. Have a softer suspension, but at least in these sweeping corners it is managing to hold the line pretty well. And I believe I mean, if the engine power was more, we could have gone even further faster. By the way, this bike does have pretty good on engine braking.
Let's talk about some of the downsides. The power and acceleration is a bit low for the bike to become a proper highway tourer. The tires are slightly on the thinner side, though you can upsize to 140 on the rear section. The cruising speed of this motorcycle is about 100 km per hour, and anything over that the engine feels stressed. The gearbox is a bit clunky. There are several motorcycles in this segment that have more power or even sharper handling, but if you're a guy who spends kilometers and kilometers in bumper to bumper traffic or tackles a lot of bad roads, then this is the motorcycle for you. This may not be the motorcycle that we want, but this may be a motorcycle that a lot of people in India need. And that has always been with Hero. They have understood the needs of the common man and delivered a motorcycle suited to that. So maybe not sporty performance or a thrilling ride, but this motorcycle covers the bases of comfort, reliability and mileage, which I think are the pillars of the basic needs for Indian commuter motorcycles. So a good effort from Hero and absolutely great on the styling. I hope this bike will do well, and Hero will be making more sportier motorcycles for us sport bike enthusiasts. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you on my next video. This is Rahul. Goodbye.